Zora and Me, Chapter 2. I am not lying, Zora shot at Stella Brazel. Zora and me and our friend Teddy were facing Stella Brazel and her gang, Henny, Joanne, and Nella. They were jealous of the attention kids showered on me and Zora for having been right at the spot when Sonny met his fate. All four of those girls, Brazils as we called them among ourselves, were daughters of professional men, a doctor, a dentist, a tailor, and an undertaker. This meant more to them than it did to us. To hear them talk, you would have thought they were the duchesses and countesses and princesses of Eatonville. They carried themselves like every day was Easter. Nearly all the other girls would have liked to be them, and the older boys were always buzzing around them. And the more it happened, the more the Brazzles were the focus of every eye, the more they believed that they should be the focus of every eye. You are too lying, Stella snapped. You are the lyingest girl in town. You're so lying, even when you tell the truth, it comes out a lie. He turned into a half gator, Zora insisted, and I saw it. I was there. Recess had just started, and our whole class was gathered in a tight half circle before Zora. Stella hated sharing the spotlight with anyone, but especially with Zora. Stella Brazel crossed her arms and smirked. Where was this Zora? Top of a magic beanstalk? Everyone laughed except for Teddy and me. We exchanged a look and then looked protectively at Zora. She didn't notice us. Her eyes were focused on her audience. I'm going to tell y'all just how it happened from the very beginning, Zora said. Don't nobody want to hear your old lies, Stella Brazel barked. Ain't that right, y'all? Not a soul moved or uttered a word, not even the Brazzles. Zora took that as a cue to begin. Everyone was eager for a story, and we all knew that nobody could tell a story better than Zora. I finished up my chores early last night so I could go out on the porch and catch fireflies over at the blue sink. Fireflies are so thick there at night, you can just put out your arm and they'll land on it. You don't even have to try to catch them. I couldn't have been there more than 10 minutes, and I'd already filled my jar when I heard a strange whistling sound. You could hear us holding our breath. It was so quiet. What kind of whistling? Ralph Hardiman asked. His eyebrows raised like clothespins were keeping them up. Strange sounding, not like any bird or person I ever heard make, Zora said. But that wasn't the worst of it. The night started getting dark and misty, and the fireflies started disappearing. Soon I couldn't make out a thing in front of me until I got near Mr. Pender's house. Then what happened? Teddy and I asked in unison. I was surrounded by white fog, but not thick like clouds. Nuh-uh, it was stringy like spider webs. She suddenly waved her fingers at us like they were daddy longlegs, and half the circle jumped back, but nobody laughed. Then, as fast as it started, the spiderweb fog disappeared. I was flat on my belly in wet grass, right up close to Mr. Pender's porch in the dark. I didn't even realize I'd gotten that close. I lay there for a long minute, still as stone, trying to steady my eyes on the glowy light inside the house. Half a dozen voices. What you see? The screen door swung open. Zora paused for effect. Out of the light stepped Mr. Pender, but where his nose and mouth should have been, he had a long, flat gator snout. A gator snout? We all shouted, even Stella Brazel, in spite of herself. Zora nodded slowly. That's right, she said. Mr. Pender looked like a gator man, man-body gator head. That's his secret, and that's how come can't no gator kill him. One thing about gators that folks outside our parts don't usually know is that they make loud hissing sounds. Not all the time, only when one of their young is in trouble. It's a call to arms, and it sounds like a cross between birthing pains and dying pains. Mr. Pender, a carpenter by trade, just like Zora's father, was fishing in Amherst Lake one time in a tiny dugout canoe that he had built himself when he accidentally cornered a young gator. An older gator caught sight of this and started up that horrible hissing. Mr. Pender, no fool, knew exactly what it meant. Next thing he knew, 3 grown gators were in the water and swimming his way. But he didn't panic, not the way I heard it told. He let the gators get close to his boat, then threw the bucket full of fish he'd caught right at them. It distracted them just long enough for him to jump in the water and swim like the dickens to shore. The 3 gators smashed his boat to pieces, but Mr. Pender lived to tell the tale, without a scratch on his peanut-colored bald head. If any other man in the town had survived the same experience, he would have crowed about it all over creation. Not Mr. Pender. No one would have known about it at all if Joe Clark hadn't seen him carving a new canoe and asked him what happened to the old one. Everyone knew Mr. Pender to be quiet and honest, and no one doubted the story for a minute. Still, some folks ran to the lake anyway and found the splintered pieces of the dugout canoe washed up on the shore. All of Eatonville looked at Mr. Pender a little funny after that. so it didn't seem so far-fetched that Mr. Pender could actually be what Zora said he was, half gator and half man. Well, then what happened? Stella Brazel snapped the question, angry at herself for being curious. What do you think? I jumped up and ran, but the whole way home I could hear the creaking sound of a gator opening its jaws and clapping them shut. Teddy blinked. Did he follow you? He asked, nervous, like it had just occurred to him that Mr. Pender might be gaining on Zora and the rest of us, even now. Zora didn't have a chance to respond. Our teacher, Mr. Calhoun, stepped out onto the stoop of the schoolhouse and rang the bell. The spell was broken. As we all ran inside, kids shouted things like, "Aw, fibber! You crazy, Zora!" and "You ain't seen no such thing!" "All right, don't believe me then," Zora said. "But when all y'all could have been playing kickball, you were standing around like boards listening to me. That alone is proof I'm telling the truth." And she beamed, as proud as if they had given her a medal for bravery. The rest of the day I paid maybe half attention to the lessons at best. Zora had cast a long shadow over my favorite swimming hole. There's a lot of places in and around Eatonville where you can have a swim, but Blue Sink, barely bigger around than a big house, but deep enough that it never dried up, was ours. At the deepest end, an old weeping willow dipped in the water like a braided head, and we would swing out on its strong vines before letting go at just the right instant. Those moments of flying in the air before the water swallowed us in one cool gulp were pure joy, and I hated to think they were over. But I also couldn't stop thinking about what Zora had said. Just because something's good listening doesn't necessarily make it true. And Zora didn't have any trouble telling a fib or stretching a story for fun. I could tell that Zora herself believed the story, but the question was, did I? By the time 3 o'clock finally came, it was so hot that I convinced myself it was all foolishness. The three of us had been swimming at the Blue Sink since forever, and with the heat probably pressing up to 100 degrees, I was willing to take my chances. I just had to have a dip.